Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's session of the Police and Crime Panel. Please note that the proceedings at this meeting are at the moment being recorded and streamed live. Before we proceed, I would like to bring your attention to some housekeeping matters. If you wish to speak during the meeting, I would ask that you raise your hand and wait for an invitation to speak in the normal fashion. So moving on to our first item, which is apologies. Ross, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Lever, Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Goodman-Bradbury, Councillor Penberthy, and Councillor Mrs Aspinall is substituting today, and we understand Councillor Ewing will be late.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. We will go through page by page. Starting with page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's it. From this chair, I would like to propose those minutes as a true and accurate record. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Yep, Councillor Thomas. Tom's abstained. Yeah. Okay, do we have anything to declare at this point? No. Okay, we'll leave that open as and when. Moving on to public question time. We have one question received from Mr. Snow. Welcome, Mr. Snow. Please ask your question.
Thank you. Right, so how does the panel show accountability for the actions of the police and its commissioner? And please bear in mind, I have evidence which actually shows malfeasance actually at various bits and pieces. Also evidence here, perhaps the police like to explain.
Okay, thank you. The panel was established under the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011. Publicly scrutinises the Police and Crime Commissioner, who in then turn holds the Chief Constable to account for the performance of the police. The panel reviews the Police and Crime Plan, annual report, and holds confirmation hearings. Additionally, the panel assesses the proposed Chief Constable's appointment and removals, precept levels, and complaints against the Commissioner. During meetings, the panel receives a scorecard on the police force performance with a number of key indicators which can be scrutinised, such as today's meeting under item 11. Panel members request areas for consideration to scrutinise at future meetings of the panel at every meeting, which is then taken forward by the chair, the vice chair of the panel. Finally, since the publication of the Peel report of the force, the panel have reviewed all areas that were rated inadequate to ensure that the Commissioner and the force were ensured to continue improvements. The panel has had continued to receive updates of this progress within the Commissioner's update reports. Thank you very much. There are no additional questions allowed because we have to have the questions in writing. But thank you very much for attending today. You're very welcome to stay and observe today's meeting, but there are no more questions. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 5, which is our action log. Ross, are there any comments regarding the action log?
Through you, Chair, is there for members' information should they wish to interrogate further, happy to do so.
Okay, any questions? Observations? No? Okay. We now move on to the main business of the day, which is the proposed precept, budget and medium-term financial strategy. So before I hand over to the Commissioner and Nikki to present, I would like to ask members to hold any questions until after the Commission has presented her report. We will then take questions for the Commissioner and then enter debate. So thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Some of you will have been on this journey with me for some years, and some of you will have been, this will be your first budget process that you've gone through as a panel. So bear with me, I'll do some introduction around the budget and why. Then I'll hand over to Nikki Allen as the Treasurer to give you the numbers and the detail about that. And Chief Constable Mr. Cornwall is here to help answer any operational questions in relation to the budget. So I think the first thing is, just to say, Chairman, you've been asking for the Chief Constable to come before you for some time. So this is Jim's first time to be here today. So please be gentle with him. Not that he can't deal with robust questioning, but he's our acting Chief Constable and he's been holding the fort for the last 6 months, which I'd like to thank him for. So just a few words to set the scene, really. Firstly, as you know, I want to reassure you that while we have an acting Chief Constable in Mr. Cornwall, until we have a resolution to the appointed Chief Constable's suspension, I want to reassure you that we are working hard to provide stability for the force and the continuity of policing services during this time for both the employees and for our communities. And in fact, this last year has seen significant improvements across public contact, the management of sexual and violent offenders in our communities, and improvements in crime recording. These are areas that His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services are monitoring, as you know, and I will keep you updated on progress as to what's happening in that realm. But turning to the wider policing, economic and political landscape, we know that nationally public confidence in policing is at an all-time low. And the reasons we can all guess or assume, but there are a few things that I probably ought to say. One is in relation to the national scandals relating to police officers abusing their power in the most unimaginable ways. And also there has been so much investment in policing and the public still can't feel, see and touch that investment that both they've been funding and the government has too. And I think set against low conviction rates on some of the crimes that really matter to people, such as shoplifting and rape, I think added to that, when an arrest is secured, the judicial system is riddled with delays, and the public perception is that the policing appears to be distracted from the issues that really matter to them. So there is a national narrative about the state of policing at the moment. So yes, there is a crisis of confidence in policing nationally, and we can't be complacent in Devon and Cornwall. We've always had slightly better performance in public confidence than the national picture, but we've still got a lot of work to do. We also know that there's going to be political uncertainty this year over what spending priorities the government may choose to look towards. We face a general election later this year, obviously not exactly sure when, and of course the Police and Crime Commissioner election, which is happening in May. And we've got local elections in Plymouth and Exeter too. So there's quite a lot of things going on in the political realm that could, there's a bit of uncertainty at this time. And that's before we even account for the cost of living crisis that's happening and its impact on crime. Fraud and acquisitive crime is on the rise, as is domestic abuse. Violence against women and children is now a priority for our constituents, and I'll talk more on that later. But I would like to take a moment to just recognise the vast majority of police officers, staff and volunteers working across our peninsula who work hard to keep us safe from harm and secure justice for those who experience crime firsthand. It's all about teamwork. The policing system only works when all the links in the chain are connected at optimum levels. So that begins with crime prevention, which a lot of you and your organisations will be involved in, through to arrest, charge, conviction and imprisoning the most serious criminals in a timely fashion. We are seeing some cases time out and victims let down by delays where justice is not served. So it's about supporting all the links in that chain, supporting our officers to be more effective. So with your help and the government's help over the past 8 years, we have secured the highest number of police officers employed in this force of 3,610, and we don't want to lose them anytime soon. A sustainable, measured policing strategy is built on teamwork, again, the chain, and that chain has to connect over a huge geographical area, the largest in England at 4,000 square miles, so slightly bigger than all of your local authorities, 13,500 miles of road, and a population of 1.8 million people. That's 24/7, every minute of every day, 365 days a year. And we are the #1 domestic tourist destination, let's not forget, for good measure, and all that that entails for policing. But we have achieved this together. And my ask today is that we build on this achievement, that we continue to link together in a collaborative approach, because this is what makes our constituents feel reassured that we are working together to build safer, more resilient and connected communities, particularly in a world of uncertainty. So for our police service, it brings confidence to community policing, which the Acting Chief Constable aims to be competent, compassionate and with a common sense approach. And he'll possibly elaborate on some of that in the questioning. Against a backdrop of negative chatter, successful policing comes down to building strong local relationships, as you all know, and a huge part of the chain that I described earlier are those relationships. Now, I get stopped in the street, as I'm sure many of you do, by people telling me about the police officers who are changing communities positively. I'm going to name a few here of just recent examples to give you a flavour across the patch. But Sergeant Neil Powers in Dartmouth and Acting Sergeant Dan Lewis in South East Cornwall, who linked up with the force as a corporate entity to organise a whole force police operation in areas to tackle drug dealing in licensed premises. Just great policing built on community intelligence. And I must mention PCSO Rebecca Steed, who I'm sure some of you will already know, who organised school engagement as part of a drug prevention scheme. But you know, we are one of the forces which has a passive drugs dog, and that was used in those operations, even taken into the school and college. And I think these are really excellent examples of preventing people wanting to do things in a school environment, for example. There's Inspector Ben Shardlow of Ivy Bridge, who reduced antisocial behaviour by convening all partners in an action plan. And that was visiting local businesses, local schools, local councillors, local teamwork delivering success. And I think that's, you know, seeing action on antisocial behaviour when we all work together, it does make a difference, and it has worked in Ivy Bridge. In Barnstable, Really great investigative work. Some of you may remember this in the media, but the use of CCTV footage, which ultimately led to the identification of a vehicle, which they then identified a number of potential suspects who might own that vehicle. This was in North Devon, and taking DNA samples from those owners, and they caught the perpetrator, which led to an arrest and a conviction of a local man who had raped and sexually assaulted 2 women. Just really great detective work. And PC Bolt, who was a former PCSO turned police officer in the past few years, who caught a prolific shoplifter while he was off duty in South Devon. You know, just some really good examples of policing doing their duty day in and day out. So we're seeing quality policing in this region already that are doing the things that we expect them to do. But my ask of you today is that we build on this great work that's already happening, that we link together to deliver a stable, measured policing strategy that will be resilient throughout our promises to be a turbulent year for policing, for our partners, for politics, and for our communities. So to achieve this, Chair, a measured policing strategy that is future fit for the coming year, I'm asking for the precept increase of 4.95%, equivalent to £12.94 for a Band D property. This is just short of the maximum precept that I can actually request, and I'm grateful that you have all been proactive to protect lower income working families and children in care who will be able to get a benefit to pay up to 100% of their council tax. And this is reassuring for many who are really struggling to pay. So I thank you and your local authorities for putting those opportunities forward. Now, value for money is at the forefront of my mind. And you'll see in the budget survey that value for money is not looking like the public think it's that value for money at the moment. But I'm aware that it's a balancing act between maintaining services whilst looking for marginal efficiency gains. And I've spent most of my term of office investing in more police officers, more services through my commissioning budget, more buildings that are new and sustainable. But I recognise that as a backdrop of ever-increasing costs, it's important to be prudent. So as part of the 24-25 budget, we will be making savings of up to 5.4 million. That's less than 1% of the total budget, and I'm sure many local authorities would like to be in that position. And I will continue to lead the region in the southwest on finding efficiencies across the 5 forces, while cementing the achievements of Operation Scorpion, which we talked about at last panel, to make this region the most hostile for drug dealers. And our next big push in this regional direction is that we will be focusing on Operation Ragwort, which is tackling organised criminals in our rural communities who steal animals and property. So we're coming for you now. We are getting organised in the region to make sure people cannot do this easily. So I would now like to outline the 3 key areas of focus in my budget plan. When writing this plan, I chose to walk in the shoes of 2 important stakeholders, our constituents and victims of crime. So firstly, levels of confidence in policing. According to the Your Safety, Your Say that's in the budget paperwork, our constituents want visible policing. However, public expectations are changing. For the first time in our survey, it shows that people are prioritising violence and abuse, which they haven't before. We've had to prioritise that on a professional level because it's one of our major crimes, but people are prioritising it now. But antisocial behaviour is still the top issue to be tackled, and luckily is recognised by the government because it's across the country as a priority. So we will be receiving £1.5 million of government funding towards addressing antisocial behaviour this financial year coming. And I am also investing £500,000 to improve the way the force deals with complaints from the public, so the force can better learn from their mistakes. So one of our strategies to build public confidence has been to open more police stations to the public than any other UK force during my term of office. By next week, we will have opened 13 more police inquiry offices, including Lou, which I know Councillor Toms is delighted about and we've visited, Devonport, and I'm sure Councillor Hayden is delighted that Plymouth as a city now has 3 front inquiry offices for policing. Honiton, I'm sure Councillor Loudon is delighted that we'll be opening that one in his patch. And we've got Kingsbridge, and I'm sure Councillor Thomas would be really delighted to see that there's more access for his residents. Oakhampton, and Councillor Ewings isn't here, and I know she would be delighted that we're opening Oakhampton. And Ilfracombe, Councillor Lever, who's not here, and I know she will be delighted that that one's being opened. But today I'm announcing a further 4, and I await planning for 1 more in Exmouth. But let's not talk about bats today. But I will get the planning permission. I will do my best to see what I can do to ensure Exmouth gets its new station. But the 4 that I'm announcing today are Exeter, and I'm working closely with Councillor Wright to identify a good location in the city centre. Liscard, I'm sure Councillor Worth and Alvey are delighted that Cornwall are getting another police station front desk opening. And Ivy Bridge, Councillor Crode, I'm sure you'll be really pleased to see that people can go to that front desk and ask questions. And Tavistock, which again, I think Councillor Ewings would be delighted to hear if she was here today. And that's going to serve an extra 165,143 people in our communities in the catchment areas. And this will bring the total number of police inquiry offices open to the public to 28, and it was 10 when I arrived in 2016. Now this is a visible and meaningful investment in our communities to deliver accessible, face-to-face policing, and which victims of crime who are in need are able to access it, and it reassures law-abiding people that policing is on their side and we're investing in their communities to keep them safe and delivering value for money so that they can get a benefit. And as well as looking at policing from our constituents' perspective, this budget plan is founded on the experience of victims of crime, which I have responsibility for. So now being victim-focused, violent crime has increased by 11.9% since 2019. And levels of reported violence are exceeding pre-pandemic levels, and a third more than that are domestic abuse related. My office's contract with victim support shows that 29,543 people were referred to support in 2023. While violent crime levels are lower than the UK average, it is still unacceptable and no reason for complacency. I welcome the government's legislation to lay a duty upon you all to tackle serious violence, and the government funding associated with that of 657,341. But I am also dedicating an additional 600,000, so this is a total additional investment of 1.257 million for tackling violence in our area. Now, I understand that my precept request is in the context of unprecedented pressure for each of your constituents and the councils that you represent. You face limited resources, while all the while there is a need to keep our constituents safe. And I want you to know that I can help play a part in managing the challenges that you face. I have, for example, in Columpton with Devon Council, where I have secured a scheme that sees prisoners building homes for the homeless. With high inflation and interest rates, the police will not be able to continue to improve their services, which are such an important part of the community's ability to feel and be safe, without such a precept rise of the level that I'm asking. The alternative is that we stop recruiting police officers, increasing pressure on other stakeholders such as yourselves, that we abandon the police station reopening programme and allow public confidence to drop even further. Now, we have a track record of being at our best with our communities when we work together, and you have graciously supported my previous 7 budget proposals. But I do not take this support for granted, and I know that you will be expecting tangible results, as you already have on firearms licensing, public contact, antisocial behaviour this year alone. So my ask is that you support me in a precept increase of 4.95%, equivalent of 12.94 for a Band D property, or the equivalent of £1.29 per month if paid over 10 months. My commitment to you is that I will continue to work tirelessly for policing in this region, working with our dedicated officers and teams, and most importantly with you and our constituents. We will work smart and hard to continue to deliver safe, resilient and connected communities. Thank you for listening. I'm now going to hand over to Nikki Allen, the Treasurer of my office, who'll be giving you an overview of the totality of the funding available to policing, along with the ways in how this precept proposal will sustain our budget over the coming years. Nikki.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. As you see, there's slides up for you to follow with what's being said, but these will be made available to panel members, so don't worry about having to take notes or anything. These slides are going to focus on the financial data and information we've used to put the medium-term financial plan together. However, you will appreciate other information has been used. Extensive consultation with the Chief Constable, and I refer you to the letter that's attached to the report, and also the survey undertaken with the communities, and again, this is attached to the report. But these slides will focus on the financial data. So I'll start by looking at what we assumed last year and where we are now. So for 2023-24, sorry, I can't turn over. 2023-24 is the final year of the CSR, the current CSR. And included within that, we had a grant level increase of 150 million, which has been maintained. So that is as it was, as we were assuming. Council tax flexibility, we were told in the CSR, would be £10 per Band D. That, as you know, has been increased to £13 per Band D for 24-25. For 23-24, we assumed a pay award of 2%. However, we did have a contingency within our budget, which effectively gave us a little bit more room as we were a bit nervous about the 2%. The Home Office did agree a 7% pay award. However, they did step in and provide additional funding for all areas across England and Wales to substitute or to bridge that gap. And what they did was they bridged the gap between 2.5% and 7%. For Devon and Cornwall, this equated to £12 million additional grant, but the cost to us was £13 million. So we had a very small gap within that overall award. This was mainly due to the way the grant was distributed. Rather than it being on staffing, it was done on our funding formula. The other main thing that we assumed last year was the police officer pension contribution, which we assumed would be 31%. That's gone up to 35.3%, but the Treasury have stepped in and bridged that gap in full, so we didn't have to do any issues with that one at all. So if I look at the provisional settlement that we had in December last year, I will say that at the point of writing these papers, it was still a provisional settlement. On Wednesday this week, we've had the final settlement come in, and there's been no changes, so the overall settlement stays as it is. So consultation was undertaken with the provisional settlement, and we did respond. The main issues we brought up were about the significant increase in the ring-fenced and specific grants, because ours increased by 14.5 million. That does increase risk in the budget, as those have to be agreed annually. And this particular provisional settlement does actually continue to focus on efficiency and productivity, specifically around the productivity review that's been recently published. The slides that I'm showing you today, the first band of 4 boxes are the national impact, and the second band of 4 boxes below it are what that means for Devon and Cornwall. So that you can see we've had an increased grant of 187,000 million. For Devon and Cornwall, that is an increase of 1.9 million, 4.3 million to us. Most of that was announced in the CSR for 21, 150 million of it. The maintenance of the national uplift in officers has been maintained. However, the provisional settlement does give exact numbers to be maintained, but this has changed for 24-25. Not all forces were able to meet the target for uplift, and therefore all other areas were asked if they could recruit above the baseline. Devon and Cornwall were fortunate that we were able to accommodate this request So we are recruiting above the baseline of what was originally agreed. However, I do want to stress that it is within the budgeted amount of 3,610 officers. The reason for that is because the national uplift is based on headcount, not on FTEs. Our budget is based on full-time equivalents. The original baseline was 3,584 headcount, which has now been increased by 71 officers to 3,655 headcount. And just reiterate, that is still within our 3,610 full-time equivalents. National funding has also been reallocated to help us with those additional 71 that we've recruited. So for Devon and Cornwall, we've received an extra £3.4 million. We don't know how certain we will have to maintain those numbers. The numbers do impact on the grant as it is ring-fenced, and we don't know how long we've got to maintain them. We know for 24-25, any longer we don't have that information at the moment. 437 million has been increased on specific and ring-fenced grants. A lot of this is about mandatory expenditure that we have to incur. So 286 million is to do with the pension grant, and that covers the additional element of the police officer pension that I talked about on my first slide. 82.8 million of it is an increase in the ring-fence grant for the maintenance of those officers that we've had as part of the national uplift. There's a new specific grant come in, which is the additional recruitment of the additional 71 I just talked about. And I do apologise for throwing numbers at you. We can put this all in a briefing for you. And there's also been a very small increase for the City of London precept, so that's where the 437 million comes in. The government have also stated that an additional 298 million would be available if all PCCs maximise their precept by the £13 flexibility that's been announced. However, that is a national figure. It's very difficult to equate it to a local figure because they use national averages for things like council tax base increases, and the national figure is 0.7%. In Devon and Cornwall, we've got an increase of 1.2%, so we are slightly above the national elements on those ones. The overall increase nationally is 6%, so that's what we're looking at. When you take into account all of the different elements that we've got, Devon and Cornwall is actually, based on national figures, 7.1% increase. But I do want to reiterate as well, again, that a lot of this is to do with mandatory expenditure on things like pensions, pay award, and the additional recruitment that we've been asked to do. So that's the overall provisional, now final settlement. Budget assumptions. So our budget assumptions include for 23-24 a pay award of 3%. Thereafter, a pay award of 2%. 1% on a pay award for us is approximately 3.6 million. What we have to remember is our pay awards fall on the 1st of September each year, not on the 1st of April. So there is that part-year effect that we work through the MTFS. Police officer pensions, I've mentioned previously, have gone up. We've included that in with the additional funding and assumed that that will continue on over the years. Capital grant funding, we don't receive any from the Home Office. It stopped in 22-23. It's still not being reinstated, so we get no support for our capital grant, for our capital funding. So the Devon and Cornwall, this is the planning assumptions that we've used and just some data and facts and figures for you about what we're looking at. So the budget requirement will be, with this proposed budget, £406.5 million. That's an overall increase of 22.1 million. Part of that relates to the pay award that was given for the part-year effect last year, and part of it relates to the additional funding that we've been given for this year. So 7.7 million of it is rebasing for the pay award that was given on the 1st of September 2023. So it does make it a little more complicated when you have to work through these figures, I'm afraid. And the rest of it is to do with the mandatory expenditure that I've talked about. I've said earlier the specific grants has gone up. It's gone up by 14.5 million for Devon and Cornwall. That's an increase of 148%. It's gone up from just under 10 million to just over 24 million, and all to do with pensions, additional recruitment and the ring-fenced uplift grant. So it does put additional risk in the budget because obviously specific grants and ring-fence grants have to be agreed annually. We have a capital programme of 94 million. This covers what is currently known. And as we know, things do come out of the woodwork, excuse the pun, when we look at things like the RAC that's affected us all across all local authorities. So things like that do come out, but it's a capital programme which hopefully we'll see some refurbishment and covers things like vehicles, estates, ICT and equipment for police officers. So it's quite an extensive programme there. We have pay and inflation pressures of 24.7 million. The majority of that is on pay. As you all know, staffing costs for our gross revenue budget is 85% of our expenditure. So significant pay within it. Within that, police officers are 58% and our police staff are 28%. So due to the penalty that we may have if we go below our uplift numbers, it means that any savings or any reductions in the budget effectively have to be made on 42% of our budget. So you do have one arm tied behind your back when you're having to achieve reductions and savings. We've talked about the £12.94, 4.95 on a band D. And we've talked about the fact that the funding is reliant on the maintenance of those police officers as we see it. We do have savings and efficiencies in the budget of 5.4 million. We have some savings reviews of 1.6 million, and that covers things on an ongoing basis which we look at as we continually go through the year. There are some planned areas, and we do have a vacancy management process that we go through whenever any post becomes available. We have some planned savings of 2.3 million. Some of this is to do with moving some of the functions into the Vision Zero Southwest, which they are now covering, but we also have some various small items which makes up the difference there. Fortunately, as one of the savings that we've had is that we had quite a significant increase built into the budget last year for utilities. We were looking at sort of 100% increases. Luckily, that didn't come to fruition, so we've rebased those utility services and taken them back down to what they should be now. So there's an element there. And I've talked about the fact that our staffing equates to 85% of the overall budget. So very staff. So that's one of our biggest risks on those assumptions. So financial risks and resilience. And I will dwell on this slide for just a moment because it is an extremely important, I think, element of what we're talking about. Financial resilience is extremely important during periods of economic volatility. And over the last 6 years, we've seen public sector organisations struggle and some even issue Section 114 notices. This has been particularly stark this year when you see the likes of Birmingham City Council and Thurrock both issuing these notices. It's also widely reported around the problems that Somerset County Council are encountering. I think it's yet to be fully understood the impact on those organisations that surround a local authority that have a Section 114 notice, because obviously some of those services have to stop, and the other public sector organisations, we don't really fully understand the impact on them. The building blocks for financial resilience are fairly simple. Make sure you can afford what you buy. Always look at ongoing liability from a decision. Don't use reserves for recurring expenditure. And always consider risk and ensure your assumptions are realistic. There are many other blocks, but those are the simple ones. And if we stick to those objectives, we will end up with a resilient way forward. Some of the mitigations that we can put in place: a balanced medium-term financial position, and that's what is before you today. Assurances of no cliff edges in what we're presenting. We are not using money to fund ongoing expenditure with no exit strategy. So within that budget, there are no ongoing expenditures. Realistic assumptions. We have been very careful to be prudent over our assumptions and have used data from the Office of Budget Responsibility and anything that's published by the government as part of their autumn statements and as part of their spring budgets. And we continually look at them during the year to make sure that they remain realistic. And another form of mitigation is general reserves to weather those unexpected storms. Our general reserve is approximately 4% of our net revenue budget, which is well within the recommended limits of our reserve strategy. And the final element for mitigation is good, transparent decision making. Decisions are published where appropriate by the Commissioner. Resilience is also achieved through good governance and processes, and there are a number of levels of protection in form of both external and internal audit, along with our independent audit committee. There are also other inspection regimes which we know of, HMICFRS, that can aid with that transparency. We have a code of corporate governance which lays out the way in which we run our business, and that includes for a treasury management strategy, a capital strategy, and a reserve strategy. And all of these are geared towards ensuring risk is minimised and resilience is maximised. Inflation has significantly reduced since the peak in October 22 from 11.1%. Inflation in November was 3.9%, and this is what we use to plan our budgets. And then we check what comes out in December, and as we know, it went up very slightly to 4%. Although this is a significant drop, it's still below the government still above the government target of 2%. The Bank of England base rate, 5.25%. We're not expecting it to increase further, and in fact, we may see some reductions this year. This will be particularly relevant when we're looking at borrowing. We're not expecting to have to externally borrow until 25-26, and by that time, we're expecting to see those rates coming down. Devon and Cornwall are in the very fortunate position that we haven't had to do any external borrowing, and we've been able to benefit from those increased rates with our investment portfolio. As you all will be aware, our budgets are particularly volatile to pay award assumptions, and I know I keep reiterating that, but it is such a significant element of our budget. We also have things like the review of the funding formula and the impact of what that review may do. We are fully engaged in that process. The Commissioner sits on the strategic group, and I sit on the technical reference group. We were expecting consultation to be out by now, but it has been delayed. Maintenance of police officer levels, again, I won't go on about that again, but that is a significant risk for us about maintaining those numbers. I think the increased levels to specific grant, again, another risk which I have already mentioned, but it does increase our risk of that ongoing funding. Long-term impact on funding levels is another risk for us. As I said before, 24-25 is the last year of the comprehensive spending review. This means that longer-term assumptions are more challenging. Due to this, we've been very prudent with our assumptions. We also know that there will be a general election at some point in the year, but as yet we don't know when that may be. This may impact on our ability to achieve a multi-year funding at the next settlement period, which starts in 25-26. We've started work with the Home Office and been providing data to them so that to inform any future funding assumptions. So we haven't just waited, we are actively working with them on that. The next slide is about the inflation assumptions, and this time last year, this looked very, very different. So I won't dwell on this one because I have talked about it before. But last year we were looking at electricity, gas being sort of 100%. We've rebased that, brought it down, and we've included the 3% increase for next year. Fuel, again, has been rebased, and we've included an increase of 3%. Construction, we're looking at about a 3% increase for that as going forward, and pay award, we've increased 3%. So as you can see, we're looking at a fairly stable 3% across all of the inflation that we're looking at for next year. So if we look at council tax, the council tax base is increased by 1.21%. And as I said, this is higher than the national average of 0.7% that the government have used in the provisional settlement. However, that's slightly down on what we were predicting. We were predicting a 1.5% increase. We've also had a net surplus of 1.4 million. That's slightly below what we're expecting as well at 1.8 million. I don't think that's anything to be surprised about. Because of the cost of living crisis, there could be more people accessing support for their council tax, and also the debt levels may have gone up. So I think it's nothing to be particularly surprised about. And as the Commissioner said, there is additional support being given by some councils for those that of working families, and also some care leavers. So the chargeable dwellings, this has not changed significantly from last year, but this is the chargeable dwellings that all local authorities publish in September, and this is the September 23 data of what you had at that point. So for A to D, that's 83% of all of the dwellings within Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and with Band B being the largest. And again, not significantly different to last year, but Band D does represent 25% of the overall chargeable dwellings for Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. When you look at the council tax anticipated for council tax Band D levels, as you will be aware, these were published a week ago, and people have had their, a lot of other areas have had their panels since then. But at the point of publishing, what I've done is I've assumed that most people would take the maximum amount. Most have, there are a few that have been slightly less. But that's what we're looking at. So Devon and Cornwall are just slightly below the midpoint of where we're looking at with our Band D equivalent. So for council tax proportions, we're dead in the middle, again, of what we're looking at, and this is a proportion between the grant and the precept, and this is what we're looking at. So Devon and Cornwall, last year, were 42% council tax and 58% grant. We're now 41% council tax, 59% grant. So a very slight shift, not significant. I think this reflects the increased level of specific and ring-fence grants that we've been given for this year. So that's where we're looking. So we are quite within the middle. And as you will notice, on one end, the top 5, there's actually only one that's in England. All the rest are within Wales. Oh, sorry, there's 2 within Wales. So management reserves, this is another area of talking about risk and resilience. So this is the management of our reserves. And I won't read out the slide, but it is all about our reserve strategy and how that works for us, which outlines the risks. The reserve strategy is reviewed annually, and it's reviewed alongside the treasury management strategy and the capital strategy. All of them are intrinsically linked of the way they work, and they are reviewed annually. They are taken through our independent audit committee, and then they're taken through our resources board, which include the Chief Constable and the Commissioner for approval. So all of that goes through a governance process prior to the budget being set. So we've got those foundations of where they are, and they are published on our website. So at the moment, our general balances, as I said, have to be between 3 and 5%. We're sitting at just very slightly below 4%, which is, quite a good position to be in. Other mitigations, you can see where they are there, but other forms of mitigations would be our monthly budget monitoring, which is between the Force and the OPCC. That's done together in one of our resources board. So those are the sorts of things we do with reserves. Our forecast level of reserves is coming down significantly, so we will start using them. Predominantly, this is around some of the areas that we're using on our capital programme. This may change over time as we may get slippage in our capital programme. I'm sure all of you are aware you get slippage in your capital programmes as well. So this is what we're looking at the moment. So we're looking at that. So we've got our general balances in the red. So you can see they're staying at just below the 4%. And the orange ones are our partnership funds, and that's Vision Zero Southwest. We keep that separate. That has to be ring-fenced, and that is spent on road safety and road safety initiatives. And you can see that over the next couple of years, that will be spent quite dramatically. And that's a partnership board with all of the partner local authorities across the patch. So council tax bands, you have got this in your budget report. It is there. It's literally just to give you the flavour of what that means. So for a bandy equivalent, £274.50 would be the total precept, which is equivalent to £1.29 increase on a bandy if paid over the 10 months. So it's just really to give you the whole information there, but it is in the budget report. You'll be pleased to know this is the final slide. So this is a reiteration of the slide that I showed you previously, with one extra slide in there. So as Section 151 officer of the organisation, it is me that has to be personally assured about the robustness and the sustainability of the budget. And I can confirm that I am assured of the robustness and sustainability of the total period of the medium-term financial plan that is before you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We now go into questions. Our Vice Chair has already marked out her territory before the meeting, pointing out she has a list of questions. So, Vice Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just take one at a time and allow everybody else to have a go. I don't want to hog the meeting. If I just go to, so everybody knows where I am, I'm on page 17 of the report, item 6. And we look, and the Commissioner has already stated about the extra 686 more police officers that has come in since you took power yourself. I think you probably would agree that was due to government funding, not from your own budget, that you were able to do that, which is good. But my main concern is police staffing. So we're seeing a dropping numbers of police staffing. I'll give you an example here in Plymouth. For example, we had 2 problem solvers in Plymouth who'd done a lot of work with Safer Plymouth. One has left, the other one is due to leave, and there is no replacement going in their place. You talk an awful lot about antisocial behaviour, working together. You talk an awful lot about funding. These problem solvers were an asset to Plymouth. So I would like to know what your actions will be regarding police staffing, please.
Chairman, there are a few bits that the Chief Constable might want to have a view on, but I'll just take a couple from my perspective. So the 686 recruited officers actually were started under council tax increases setting in my first budget in 2017. So we started recruiting police officers then. So some have been paid for by local council taxpayers. Then the 20,000 uplift came in, I want to say 2018, 2019? 2018, so it's about 216 that we funded through local council taxpayers. And that was the decision to prioritise the recruitment of police officers over police staff with the Chief Constable prior to who we have today. And so that was the staffing mix. In terms of police staff, there are more police staff today than when I took office in 2016 as well. So one of the things is that they have been increasing. There hasn't been a massive since austerity with the cuts that happened, and I think there was around 500 police staff that were cut. But when I took office in 2017, there are more police staff today than when I took office. So we are still on the increase in terms of that. But I will just let the Chief Constable have any comment, because that's a very specific one about problem solvers or police staff strategy.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, panel members, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. My pleasure to be with you this morning. Thank you for the question, Councillor. You're absolutely right to acknowledge the pressure on the total financial envelope the force has to operate in. I have to acknowledge as a Chief Constable, I don't have complete control over my workforce mix because of the stipulation that comes along with the uplift in respect of maintaining police officer numbers. That does create certain pressure, and that pressure does predominantly fall on my police staff budgets, which has been pointed out by Nikki as we've gone through the presentation. And it is a mixed picture. So as has been referenced, we do have very tight controls around our vacancy management in order to drive savings out of the budget. And I think around about £1.5 million has been delivered through that process in terms of both departmental reviews and some tight controls around vacancies. But as I say, it is a mixed picture. So the Commissioner has quite rightly referenced the investment in front offices. That comes with an additional investment in police staff to staff those front offices. Also, as has been mentioned this morning, is a £500,000 investment in the management of public complaints. That will be a police staff function. And also, we are investing in additional police staff capability around our performance and analysis function in order to create more of a ability for organisational insight to deal with the challenges both here and now and of the future. So you're right to highlight the value of these problem solvers. They've been a real asset in our toolbox, working alongside our neighbourhood teams. I really do value their work. That role hasn't been taken out of our design permanently, but what we're doing at the moment is just putting a brake on some of the automatic recruitment in behind some of those vacancies, just so that we can see where we can make the most intelligent and least impactful savings that we can in respect to police staff. So I can't give you any guarantee as to the long-term provision of that specific role, but I will assure you that it's a valuable tool and has delivered significant value, as you quite rightly point out.
And thank you, Acting Chief Constable, for your attendance today. I know it's appreciated by the panel, so thank you. Councillor Toms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation this morning. I note, with the comments that have been made, the Section 114s that have been issued around the country, and I do watch what goes on in Plymouth and in Devon, and I think, our own lead in finance in Cornwall Council, the portfolio holder, has said that it's going to be a tough few years, and I'm sure that's echoed in Plymouth, and I'm sure that's echoed in Devon. The finances in government, local government, are not sound and sustainable at this present time. But I look at what you've presented today, and I see that even though it's £12, add that to the £12 from our local councils and the whatever it is from the unitary authorities or the districts and county council in Devon and Plymouth, that there'll be a substantial hit on the finances of the low paid, especially in our area. And we know the deprivation, and I've spoken about that previously. But I know from the work I've done that the South West region has 5.7 million people. Scotland has 300,000 people less. Wales has 3.4 million people. I know that London, we're about 3/4 of the size of London in the South West region, but the figures are that we get so much less in funding and capital funding than if we were in London and had the same population, same funding, we would get £9.7 billion more, which is a staggering figure. And that would help not just us as councils, but every citizen of the South West. Now I look at what's been said today, and I listened to what Nicola said, especially because she is the lady in charge, and she takes the can of things go wrong. And I've looked at a few facts that might help you or assist you in this. In Cornwall, we have about 20,000 Airbnbs. In Devon, they have 15,000 Airbnbs. Now, how many of those are small businesses that pay no rate because they claim small business tax relief. And if I said to you that in Cornwall there are 15,000 second homes, and there is a proposal that lays around and been talked about for a long time of doubling the council tax on that, and that would also assist you. If I tell you that the 35,000 Airbnbs, if they pay the full council tax and the precept to the Police and Crime Commissioner, that would be an extra £9.590 million. If the second homes tax came in, and just on the figures based in Cornwall, that's without Devon, because Devon will have probably even more than that, it would be an extra £4.11 million. Now, I'm a realist, and I know that without law and order, there is nothing. There is nothing in this world without some sort of semblance of order. And I know that the police numbers are only rising. And I talked about, if you remember at a previous meeting, I said back in 2011 when we lost the 20,000, we lost 500,000 years of experience. 500,000 years of experience in those officers. The 20,000 that went out, and the 20,000 that have replaced them have got 60,000. That just shows you that we need to build back confidence. You've got to have good, competent, well-trained officers. And the only way that we're going to keep the numbers as they are is to go with this budget. I don't like saying that. I would love to say that, it's something that we can go against, but I'm a realist, as I've said, and I think my view is that it's my duty to help the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Finance Officer to have ideas of how to say to government we need more. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those observations. Commissioner or Nikki, would you like to respond?
I suppose the one thing that we can, reassurance for Councillor Toms, which I think is really helpful. Thank you for your support for this. And but one of the things I believe they may have achieved in Wales, what you're talking about, we should be achieving in Devon and Cornwall, around in the second home council tax issue. So maybe there's hope of potentially some more income coming forward. And I think I believe Steve Double MP and Scott Mann MP managed to get business rates removed from public toilets. I think if we can achieve that in Devon and Cornwall, I'm sure we can really push hard on trying to achieve those extra opportunities.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up, I have Councillor Alvey, Councillor Worth, Councillor Crode, and then Councillor Wright. So, Councillor Alvey.
Thanks, Chair, and to a degree, Councillor Toms has just pretty much stolen my thunder. But actually, it is relating to that second homes council tax. The fact that we, from 2025-26 financial year, we'll be able to clearly take that decision. However, that decision has to be made with 12 months' notice. So really my question was going to be, are you liaising with the relevant authorities to see which are actually doubling their council tax to ensure that that's in the medium-term financial plan? And also, is it possible that we consider that, bearing in mind the reason for that doubling of council taxes around the impact of second homes, particularly on rural communities, that in terms of setting future budgets, that we perhaps consider that additional funding could be perhaps targeted to those communities that are suffering as a result of second homes?
So we are liaising with the collecting authorities. We liaise with them quite regularly. Across Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, we've got 13 collecting authorities, so we do liaise with each one individually. And we are talking about second homes with them as well. We are being very prudent. We've not built anything into our MTFS yet because, as you say, it's got a 12-month. So if we don't get it done fairly quickly, it won't be in for 25-26. My other reservation slightly is that this is about council tax, and they may then, some of those may then declare it as a business and move to rates. So we just want to be a little bit prudent about the numbers that we're building in. But yes, in answer to your question, we are liaising with all the collecting authorities to see how it's going. And we are, as local authorities are, we're pushing for this to happen because we can see the massive benefit that it will be for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Worth.
Thank you, Chair. I feel a little bit like the new boy today as well because it's my first time formally at the panel. Thank you for the presentations and very well put across, particularly on the financial side. That helped to make that clear. But I'd like to say to Jim, I mean, we've talked about here some more money coming through potentially. What didn't you get? What are you looking for? What's that extra thing that would really improve stuff? You feel that if we do come along with this more money, I'm looking through, is it training, is it more officers? What is it that really will make a difference for you?
Thank you for the question. I mean, what the Commissioner has put before the panel this morning is what I see as kind of one of the 5 key planks of running an effective and efficient police force, which is what I'm held to account for and quite rightly scrutinised. And I'll just run through those five key planks if you would. So first and foremost, we've talked a lot about uplift this morning, and we've kind of perhaps glossed over how, and I will say this proudly, how successful Devon and Cornwall's uplift programme has been by proportion the most successful uplift programme in the country, both in terms of the numbers it's brought into our force, in terms of police officers, but also the financial benefits that come with it. You know, that £3.4 million extra into our baseline is by proportion the largest amount any police force has received as a result of uplift. Now that not only has brought significant new numbers into the organisation, it's increased our level of diversity, it's increased our level of creativity and innovation with new people coming into policing, challenging the culture of the organisation, challenging the status quo, suggesting a new way of doing things. So that's first and foremost. The fact that we've got a balanced budget for 24-25 and a robust and sustainable medium-term financial strategy is the second leg of a sustainable police force for me. Thirdly, we've now got a clear organisational purpose. It was referenced earlier by the Commissioner, but community-based policing delivered with competence, compassion and common sense. Now, I'm not going to seek to trample over our past, that would be improper of me, but previous visions and organisational purposes have focused elsewhere. For me, and indeed for Mr. Kerr, we worked closely on this before the events of last year. It's very much about getting, and this is said a lot, but it means a lot as well, about getting the basics of policing right, that competence element. That's why we're working closely with HMIC, FRS, our inspectorate, in respect to the areas they've identified last year for improvement, and we've delivered significant improvements, both in terms of how we answer the phone on an urgent or non-urgent basis, how we record crime, and indeed how we keep the public safe in terms of the management of some dangerous offenders out there that we know about. Across all those 3 areas, we've delivered improvements. Now, this budget helps me to sustain and build on those improvements and go further. So, for example, this year, my focus as the Chief Constable was very much around improving our investigative standards. I know there's pressure out there, maybe subject of comment by our inspector over the coming weeks in terms of our ability. Because of some of the inexperience that Councillor Thoms points to, I've got over 1,000 officers on the front line with less than 3 years' experience. So maintaining things like investigative standards is really difficult when you've lost that experience from the organisation. It's quite right to recognise that. But with a clear purpose, and compassion is really important as well from an organisational perspective. And when I say compassion, I externalise that in terms of what it means for our local communities. And that's very much a shift from where policing has been over recent years, which is all about effective demand management and getting back to focusing on quality of service delivery. That's how we measure a successful day in the office, in terms of the quality of service that we've delivered, not just our ability to push demand through the organisation, which is where it had got to pretty much in every police force you could look at in the country because of the pressure on resources and budgets. The fourth element, the fourth plank, is around how we govern ourselves in terms of how we make decisions. So we've recently refreshed and reviewed our governance structure to be more swift and agile and make decisions more effectively in respect to those areas. And the final area, if I just refer to my notes, is our operating model. So We haven't got into that level of detail this morning, quite rightly, but we as a force are now flexing our operating model. A good example of that is our Operation Synergy, which is about hubbing our specialist detectives that were previously dispersed across our vast geographic area into tiny little teams with very little resilience. And there are significant recruitment challenges around experienced detectives. So what we're now doing is, this is just one example, we're bringing those detectives together virtually and physically where we can in order to create more operational resilience and then drive standards in terms of improving those serious and complex crime investigations. That's just one example of how as an organisation we are constantly flexing in order to meet the challenges. So the budget that's before you today, not only is it one key plank of those 5 planks of sustainability in delivering effective and efficient policing, but it allows me as Chief Constable to really bake in those improvements that we've talked about and then to build further. So as I've said, 2024 will be all about improving our investigative standards, both in terms of volume crime investigations with a particular focus around domestic abuse, because I am concerned about the consistency of the service we offer to victims of domestic abuse, and also in more serious and complex crime investigations, so rape, serious sexual offences, etc., where we know we've got some pressure in the system. What this budget also allows me to do on a really practical basis is invest further into neighbourhood policing. So we've got additional 24 posts going into neighbourhood policing between now and the end of May. That's into every BCU, so every part of the force will receive additional investments. They are small, but they will be focused, and they'll really bring an additionality to our neighbourhood teams, because as a force, that's where we see the future. You know, what we had to do through the years of austerity was really strip back on our neighbourhood policing function, because we had to investigate crime and we had to respond to incidents. What got hit during those years of pressure was our neighbourhood capability. So we're gradually, with the support of the Commissioner over recent years, and indeed going into this year, we're looking to invest further into our neighbourhood capabilities. So it's a really practical example, answering your question, Councillor, in terms of where we're looking to invest the additional money that comes with this budget.
Thank you. That was comprehensive. I'll certainly compliment you in Saltash, because we met with the neighbourhood team last week with the Mayor and had a very good meeting with them. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, time to bring in some other areas, I think, apart from Cornwall. Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things, if I may. Nikki, as usual, very comprehensive. Lost me halfway through, I have to admit. I've got a couple of things here. Revenue reserves. Now, you've probably covered this again, but I need double explanation probably. So 2024, forecast balance is 23 million. 2025, it drops to 12.5 million. Did you explain why? Or could I have that explanation again?
Yeah, I briefly said something about it, but I can give you a little bit more information about what we're looking at there. So there is a significant drop coming on, and what we've got there is that we are using a certain amount of reserves for capital purposes. So we've got quite a lot of our capital schemes coming to fruition, so we're using some of those to do with our capital. So there's a drop there. We're also using some of it, I'm just looking at, so most of it is to do with our capital financing. We are actually using a little bit of it to do with our improvement reserve. We set some money aside to be able to do some improvements, so we've got some improvement reserves going on there. We've got some budget management issues that we did to smooth out the medium-term financial plan, so that's just to smooth out across the year so that we don't have any peaks and troughs. But the majority of it is around that capital financing and being able to fund the capital, which is some of it in 24-25 and going on into 25-26. And the reason I said that it may not reduce quite as sharply as we think, at the moment we're thinking it's going to do that, but if we get any slippage in the capital programme, which inevitably there will be, that would reduce that significant drop. And it could be anything to do with a delay in receiving equipment, or it could be a planning issue with regard to something we're doing on the estate. So, but we are expecting to be spending that sort of money, but it obviously will wait and see whether that comes on. That's what it's about.
Financial wizardry, isn't it? I have another question, Chairman. Is that okay? Thank you. I've just lost it at the moment, but I'm just looking at pay award and increases. So 2024 or 24-25, we're talking about 20 million. 25-26 goes to 29 million, and then on to 36 million, and then on to 45 million. That's an enormous amount of figures. So I mean, have I read this right? I mean, so pay is going to double over the next 4 years?
Okay, so this is part of the
I've got it,
medium-term
okay.
financial plan, if anybody else is thinking about it. It's page 46, and it's 3D, so it's the analysis of change into the revenue account. Those are cumulative figures. So in 24-25, we're looking at an increase of 20 million. In 25-26, it's 28.7 million, but that's cumulative, so it's actually only an increase, not only, sorry, that makes it sound frivolous. It's an increase of about 8 million, and then for the following year, it goes to 36 million, and that's another increase of 8 million, and then on to 43. So they are cumulative increases. So what we're saying is that by 27-28, the increase will be 43.7 million based on the staffing that we're paying in 23-24. So it's a cumulative figure across the life of the MTFS so that you can understand what we're looking at. Is that okay?
Your wallet's getting thicker, Chief. And I've got a third one, really. It's not a question, it's a bit of a statement, actually. So the attendance for this panel is dropping rapidly. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't veto the proposed precept, Chairman.
Well, as a point of information now, we've had a couple of members join us. Technically now we can. We have members.
But we need 15, don't we? 14. 14 point something.
13.3 recurring, Councillor Crode, but it's 14. You have 14 in the room. It does mean, though, that you'd all have to vote for a veto should you wish to exercise it.
You're very kind, Ross. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry.
Okay, you're welcome. Welcome to Councillor Wright and Hewing. You're both up next, so Councillor Wright.
Thank you, and my apologies for being late due to train cancellation. I think I emailed the wrong person to tell them, so apologies, Chair, for coming in late. But I have read everything and read it all again on the train. Councillor Toms, your questions were brilliant, and you stole probably everything that everyone was wanting to say. So thank you for doing that for the questions there. The pay increases, it's just a point really about the pay increases. They should have been expected by central government because of the pay freezes that they imposed on the public sector for so many years. I know that the government has put some money in towards trying to mitigate that slightly, but it shouldn't have taken anybody by surprise, really, that pay increases came out at a higher percentage than they would normally, because there just haven't been any for so many years. Just building on what Councillor Tom said about people that are outside of the council tax remit, I think it really is time to look at student accommodation, particularly in Exeter and Plymouth. That's not something that the Commissioner can do, but maybe that is something to take forward as something to be reviewed, because there are an awful lot of brilliant students contributing to both cities, a huge amount, and in Falmouth as well, in terms of ethos and culture and academic wealth, if you like. But this is now getting to be a very big part of the population that are exempt from council tax, and there must be a way of looking at HMOs where if the landlord could pay a set amount of council tax, it would really help, because all of those people are benefiting from the police force as well as the council services. So I wonder if the Commissioner, if she is going to take something forward to government on the recommendation of Councillor Tom could include student accommodation. Everything else is being covered really. We're all in the same situation. We're all having to put council tax up. It's yet one more tax in this country. I heard on the news that we're one of the biggest taxers in Europe because we have so many different taxes that we all have to pay. We're not going to change that in here today. But a point I wanted to make, one little question now about what's actually in the budget statement there. Can I just question page 16, 1.5, where it says children in care? Did you mean care leavers? That's fine, thank you. I thought I was missing something about children paying council tax, but that's answered that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more observations on those points?
I suppose one of the points raised by Councillor Wright, which I haven't had any discussion around student accommodation and what that entails or anything like that, so that would be worth having an offline conversation around what does that mean for us. And I think just particularly about tax and your comment, you know, one of the biggest issues is that tax is becoming more burdened at a local level. And government can talk about tax cuts as much as they like. There ain't no tax cuts in local government, and you know, anybody who's delivering a local service with there's a precept. So fire authority, police and crime commissioner and local councils are constantly putting their council tax up. I think it's a huge gap of communication of how we're getting across to the public what's actually happening in their communities. They're fully aware of it, but it's not really helpful when the national narrative talks about tax cuts all the time, and there's certainly no cuts with the whole time I've been here in terms of this budget and what I've put before you. So I completely understand Councillor Wright's comments.
Thank you. Councillor Hewins.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry I was late. I was as quick as possible at Derriford. Right, I'm going back to questions. With the reserves that you hold, Nikki, are they using Treasury Management System? And how much interest have you made? Because little old West Devon has made 1.1 million. So, you know, I would have hoped to have seen in your figures that there was shed loads of millions. And I may have missed that bit. The other question was, with the with the pensions provision, how much is the back officer staff provision for the Office of the Police Crime Commissioner? Because I'm assuming all your members of staff are on a pension, as well as, you know, the police pension that you support. And I'm assuming they're not one and the same, although you could tell me otherwise. Yeah. And just to let you know, West Devon have agreed the 100% uplift for 25-26, and we've put ours through the council already. Saves one phone call.
I'll just mention a couple of things before I pass on to Nikki, Councillor Ewings. You weren't here when I announced the 4 stations that are going to be opened this year, and the Tavistock is going to be. I thought you'd be pleased to hear that, and obviously Oakhampton's already open, so we've done quite a bit to support West Devon in terms of your community. I just thought you'd like to know that, as you just missed it slightly earlier. Nikki's got she's even got a calculator out. She's doing her calculations around some of your questions at the moment. Well, we have had some good successes in the Treasury management, but I'm sure Nikki will be able to tell you the details. She's just worked it out.
So with regard to our revenue reserves, yes, we've been very fortunate that we've been doing a lot of internal borrowing so that we haven't had to go externally and pay the high rates. So 22-23, when the rates were very, very low, we were basically getting no investment interest whatsoever. So for this year and next year, we're predicting budget of £1.5 million of investment interest. And we've been quite dynamic around how we've been able to manage those. It's all done within our Treasury management strategy, and that focuses on risk, it focuses on liquidity, with return being the final one. But we've the reason I know so much about this is we had a meeting yesterday about it, and when you compare us to all other police areas, police and crime commissioners, we're actually coming out one of the top. So we're generating just over 5% interest on all of our investments, which is quite significant. So we're doing quite a lot of work to make sure that we are generating as much as we can, but keeping that risk down, because obviously we are a public sector. We've had lots of discussions with our advisors on lending to other local authorities that might be bordering on a Section 114 notice or issues like that. So we've been keeping the risk down, but trying to keep the return as high as we can. So we've generated by about 1.5 million. We invest as much as we can out into the sector. So that's that one. Do you want me to go on to the next question? Yeah. So the pensions with the OPCC. All OPCC staff come under the LGPS pension scheme, as do all police staff. Obviously, police officers is a different pension scheme. So we're under the LGPS. I've done a very quick calculation for the OPCC. That's for employer contributions. It's around about £300,000 to £350,000 for the pension. But we're under the LGPS scheme, exactly the same as any other local authority.
To say Treasury management has been a godsend to people this year. You know, it's made a real difference, and you know, you get smart with the money. If the government give you the money, invest it.
Thank you. Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to stick to page 17. I quite like that report, to be honest with you. So I'm looking at the investment. I take that over both your terms of 12.2 million in community safety partnership. I welcome that. I also welcome the 4 million, obviously, for prevent of serious violence. What I would like, and I don't mean for it to be done today, but what I would like to see is to see where that money is actually going in local authority terms. So if I look at, say, for Plymouth, sorry I keep going on about Plymouth, but then that's what I'm here to represent. We don't have an analysis, but I do see that you fund Devon, but you don't fund Plymouth. So a little bit of a cheeky ask there. Maybe you might like to look at trying to help fund Plymouth. But also, when we're looking at the funding, you know, obviously your departments will be full aware that we have obviously done our prevent strategy, and that was sent to your office as required, but we're still waiting to hear what the final funding would be from the office. Another one, antisocial behaviour in Plymouth, we've asked for park officers. I do believe that you're very happy to support, but we're still waiting for action. I think it would help me if I could see where your money is actually going from a Plymouth point of view. Chair, I'm going to be very cheeky, as Councillor Crowe did. I'm going to ask another question, but I'm quite happy for you to answer that if you want to, Alison.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. It's quite interesting, because I'd also like to be really clear about where Plymouth is spending the money that I give it as well. So I would really like to see, and we did attempt to do it this year, but it was one step too far for some authorities. But I think if I'm returned in the next election, I would really like to see a governance body of people like yourself, cabinet members, helping me spend some of these grants that go to the CSP, the serious violence. I would like to actually have some political oversight of what we're doing with that money, like we do with Vision Zero. And at the moment, we don't have it quite in that way. So I think there's an opportunity to improve a bit of a governance arrangement around policing and crime, and a lot of the funding that comes to me and I passport to local authorities. It'd be really good to have elected members involved in that. I think that's something where I'd like to take it, because then there'd be a lot more transparency around where it's going and what it's going on. It almost has become, I've just been having this conversation with my team, we give it to local authorities, you then contract it to somebody else, and it's so far removed from me, we have no idea who's delivering on some of those services. So I think it would be really good to bring a tighter rein on that. In terms of the money for Plymouth, Are you talking about the commissioning intentions plan or something? Is it not explicit in the commissioning intentions plan, the allocations for Plymouth? And sorry, is that what you were pointing to? Because I'm just trying to find the Devon bit that you were talking about.
I think when you look at, the 12.2 million for community safety, I would like to know where it's going, where your money's going. You're funding it out.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be rude when I say this. When you look at page 17, it's a fabulous page, isn't it? I'm delivering 2.7 billion funding for police service, 4 billion for prevents, serious violence. I can go on and on and on. And it sounds absolutely wonderful, but I'm here to represent the people of Plymouth, and I want to know what's actually coming into Plymouth and how we can tackle serious violence and things like that. We do what we're asked of you, to make sure all the relevant paperwork is in, obviously, like I said, about the serious violence duty strategy and all that. But we seem to be one step behind of you in the fact you agreed to do some funding but don't actually cover it in full. Do you know what I mean? As in, this is what we're giving so we can move forward. So I think what I'm trying to say is I agree in partnership working. I certainly agree in strong leadership. I'm taking you actually feel the same as I do. And I do think there is some work that could be done ready for when we come back, whoever is commissioner next time, but some work that could be done on the budget. It's not a criticism of the way the papers are put out. Please don't take it that way, Nikki.
Councillor Hayden, I'm with you. I've actually had a similar conversation with Councillor Tyerman. Because there is a definite sort of political gap sometimes around the way the funding is either allocated or decisions about where it is spent in different local authorities. So I think it would be really helpful to do a very clear plan of what is available for Plymouth to access. While it says what we give you through here, there are others, like we've had Safer Streets come through separately, thanks to the councils helping us access that through the government. But I think that I completely get where you're talking about this, and I'd like to do that to better engage the political leadership in the decisions about how that money is being spent. So very happy to take that forward from I'm sure this office will be able to take that forward regardless.
And Commissioner, I thank you. I thank you for that. And my cheeky offer of maybe you might like to look at funding us as well as Devon for analysis, member of staff. I'll just leave that one in the air. But my next question is again, I welcome Devonport Police front staff station opening. That is absolutely fantastic. We still have a 40-minute wait call on our 101. How are you going to measure between the front desk opening and still the demand on 101? How is that measuring up? I can't see in the paper, please. I know it's in the I know we're talking about the budget, but it actually is mentioned on page 18. Whoever actually told me we're talking about the budget.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm just trying to find the latest data on the call handling issues, because what you have in front of you in your performance document, thank you, Chair, Chief Constable, is our standard measurement that we've been using for years. And I did say that we would, when we do the next police and crime plan, there's been quite a lot of feedback about what the measures should be in terms of things. So I will just help you with some latest data, because while it's saying that in the paperwork, the current performance, and we had a meeting with Her Majesty's Inspectorate on Constabulary about call handling, because this is one of the areas that is closely monitored. And I can give you a bit more reassurance that the wait is on average, it falls between, I've got it in front of me here, in January 19 minutes, in December 11 minutes, in recently in this month 23 minutes, and then last week 10 minutes. So you can see it's still fluctuating. So it's not the 40-minute as we used to see a lot and receive a lot of performance data on. It has actually had a major improvement. We have recently, the Chief has recently recruited a head of public contact that started, who I met last week. He's been here for about a month. He's come from the ambulance service, a call handling system, so we're quite confident and reassured that he's got a lot of experience to bring. So I think there's a couple of bits here. You'll see later on in the report we still aren't receiving footfall about the front desks, and that's for the Chief Constable to feel some pain today perhaps from you, that it's been a few months now that we still haven't been able to give you a report of how many people are using the front desks, and I think that's not acceptable, and we do need to improve that. Then the call handling times are just consistently improving. If you recall as well, we've had a conversation about this time it takes on a 999 call to trigger into the force, and there's a handling time that's taking too long. That's getting fixed literally, I believe, by next week. We've been waiting a few months for this technical fix. The fix is happening next week. So there's a lot of positivity around the call handling service in the force at the moment. Staff retention is remaining high, and there's been a high turnover in the past. So it shows that the performance culture is on the move, and I think they're really starting to get there. We were hoping to be taken out of engagement by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Service last week when we were there, because there is dramatic improvements, but they were holding off and awaiting the next inspection. So we think there may not be such good news so soon. But just wanted to reassure you there that the performance is a lot better, and we're reassured that we've got some really good leadership coming as well to support that.
Just answer back?
Yeah,
all right. And I look forward to seeing the measurements of it. And like I say, thank you for opening Devon, Paul. Going back on the budget, we've talked an awful lot. It's only £1.29 a week over 10 months if you're on Band D. You spoke very much about the cost of living crisis and how a lot of people would be able to get council tax support. I think we just need to remember there is a lot of people in our cities that just hit that threshold where they don't get the support, but they are extremely struggling. And I always like to put it down to real terms. So £1.29 could be a pot noodle, somebody's meal for the night. Do you know what I mean? So as much as I know some members might be a bit concerned about vetoing, I don't have an objection. I have great concerns with this coming. I see the way forward. I see the fact that we need to make our streets more safer. But I would like it on record that I have great concerns that we're putting an extra £12.94 on top of everybody else onto our residents of Plymouth. I'll leave it there, Chair. I'll come back at the end if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine, Vice Chair.
Chairman, if I may, just one point to give a bit of reassurance to Councillor Hayden is that one of the things about putting this council tax up is that I am trying to focus it on what people are telling me they want to see. And so I think the biggest one is obviously sustaining the officer numbers. And the second one is that there's 62% strongly agreed that money should be spent on opening more police stations, of which I am doing. So just to reassure you, at least I'm not just paying for some ethereal black hole. I am actually trying to focus it on what residents have told me is important to them. So a bit of reassurance about it, the difficulty in paying is at least focusing on the things that they're asking for.
Thank you. We're slipping a little bit with time. We've still got a few questions to go through, so we'll keep battling through. Councillor Loudon.
Thank you, Chair. 4 brief points. The first one to Nikki. Thank you for clear presentation there of the budget and the challenges. As far as the Acting Chief Constable is concerned, in his response to Councillor Worth, I have to say I thought that was very thoughtful, detailed and reassuring response that you gave. It's the first time I've seen you, and that was I felt that was a good summation of a response. In picking up on the points that Councillor Alvey and Tom's made about the second home council tax, give you a bit of good news. East Devon Cabinet, we voted on Wednesday evening to introduce it. So hopefully by the end of the month, Council will endorse that. So there's a bit more money hopefully coming your way. And finally, a bit of tongue-in-cheek to the Commissioner. Be careful with our bats in Exmouth.
Do you wish to pick up on
May I just thank Councillor Loudon for taking that decision in East Devon. It's one of the areas that pays the most into policing already through their council tax. So doing this, you will be definitely at the forefront of paying some of the... Obviously, you don't beat Cornwall because that's the whole of Cornwall, but in Devon, you pay the most as a council from your residents. So I want to thank you for making that brave decision to annoy, I'm sure, a number of the residents that will be in second homes in your patch. I will be very respectful and considerate to any bats that we do find. We haven't found any yet, but if we do through the survey May to September in Exmouth, we will be making sure that we protect them and work out a way forward for it.
Well, thank you, and perhaps we can get Sidmouth open then, as give us some money back.
Okay. Councillor Hackett.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to Acting Chief Constable Jim Cornwall. It's a delight to see you here, and I led the charge to have an open invitation to you at future meetings, and it allows us to speak to you directly and you to hear our frustrations and have that two-way communication, which I think will help invigorate this panel, and hopefully more members will turn up. A number of questions, probably very briefly. Congratulations, Alison, on the additional £5.5 million that you brought into us for additional funding. How is that reflected in our budget? Is it one-off, or do we have to try and make up a shortfall in the precept that we're now going to examine, scrutinise today, or will it be something we have to meet a shortfall in future years? If you could just briefly say something on that, please.
Councillor Hackett, yes, we're delighted, obviously, that we've got that level of funding from government for the uplift. There's a level of uncertainty, but we are hopeful. So we are hopeful that we think it would be stupid, of any government to not build that into the baseline for the budget. It would be ridiculous not to do so. But, who knows what that national decisions may happen. So we are cautious, but we are hoping in the next comprehensive spending review that should be considered in the round. So at this point in time, we're not expecting the cliff edge in relation to that, but we're not 100% certain that would not be the case.
Okay, a sort of flashing amber. Now, you remember we went up to London pre-COVID to try and get an additional summer funding grant for the influx of tourists coming in. And I know that puts an absolute strain on the resources of the police. Is there any progress with that? Are we going to try again? Or is there a way we can go back to the Home Office to get this funding?
Thank you, Chairman. One of the beautiful things about us doing that as a collective all those years ago is it put a marker down in government's thinking. Even though that grant was not quite the right grant to be applying for, we did it so that they had to accept evidence of our summer challenges and our rural challenges that we face here. And so doing that as a collective was very powerful. And as a consequence, with all of our efforts from my office and your supportive letters that you've sent too, obviously tourism and sparsity in terms of our rural challenge have been considered as part of the funding formula review, and we are sadly still in a stalemate of awaiting consultation from the government. But it has been considered and will be part of it for consultation. Doesn't mean it'll be there at the end, but it is certainly there at the beginning for us to make the fight, which I believe we will have to make, for it to be recognised as strong as we can in the funding formula, or we may well overall lose out should that funding formula happen. So again, I'll be looking for collective action for us to take that forward. But at the moment, the barrier is the not consulting on the funding formula by the government. Until that is released, there may well be an action for us to take.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more questions. Firstly, the combined authority devolution package, you were in the photo call last week. The detail has been somewhat scant in the release. Yes, there's £16 million coming in and the issue of voting has been raised. What effect financially will that have on this police authority? What part do you play?
In terms of that devolution deal, which is quite exciting for Devon and Torbay to have to work together to improve transport in particular, skills that they're looking at, and housing as well. In terms of, I don't receive any money to policing. However, I can help them deliver on their ambitions, which they will be receiving funding for in a range of ways. One is in the Prisoners Building Homes project. I am absolutely determined to get that as a key opportunity through the devolution deal to be utilising that across Devon and Torbay. And the other element around transport is obviously I'm really keen around the safety on transport. So my job is more to influence the way in which they may spend that funding than it is to be a decision maker through the devolution process.
Okay, thank you. I know you say Devon and Torbay, but yes, Devon County Council seem to be the lead on it, but there are 8 district councils and we are very concerned about what voting power we will have. But that is for another day and for another meeting. But finally, the issues I've got are to do with connection to 101. You used to have on your website the wait time. We asked for the abandonments. We haven't got those figures today, and I do hope they come forward because that tells how effective they are. But with the call wait time, we can no longer see what the individual time during the day is, and it's all very well giving an average time during the day, but I've had people wait for over an hour, and from personal experience, this last week I've had to contact my internet provider, and I got through within 2 minutes. So why can't an emergency service have a better response? And I know it's triaged, but it causes a problem for our communities who want to speak to a police officer urgently. And I see today the web chat, there's nobody available when I've just literally tried to log in a few moments ago. And one of the things that I will lead on to, because it's all to do with staffing, I've had somebody waiting since before October for a gun license. You've taken their money, and we're now coming up 5 months down the line, and he's still waiting for his gun license. So we need to provide that public service. We're asking for more money, yes, but the public have to have something back. And finally, Acting Chief Constable, it was a pleasure to meet you at Bideford, and we're looking forward to taking up Torres District Council office to have the hub in Jubilee Square. We look forward to seeing police in that building. So if you'd like to respond regarding the gun licensee and the abandonment times, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you, Councillor Hackett. Just firstly to say I'm going to hand to the Chief Constable on the 101 abandonment rate. He's been living and breathing this for the past 6 months or so to really get to grips with the performance and what's going on. So he's happy to answer around that. But I just will mention about the gun licence individual. If the licence is for a business purpose and not for leisure, they can be prioritised. So all I will say is if you want to come send that individual to my office, there may be some ways forward. But we brought a report to you at the last, I think it was the last panel around firearms licensing. As you know, there is a backlog of which has been isolated and being dealt with differently to everyone who's coming in as a new. So it depends whether he's new, depends whether he's a renewal, and how fast, they're all at different times at the moment. But if he has any issues and it's affecting his work, he's unable to work because of it, please tell him to come to my office and we'll liaise with the force.
Right, just to come back on that very briefly, he is a person who has a large number of trees. He has to make sure that they are maintained. It's not his primary business, but he has a grant. But we're not talking about an individual, but I'm not going to identify this individual, but I'm going to say that it's not a primary business, but he will lose potentially a grant for his forestry if he can't manage the deer. So he's in a bit of a grey area, but it's not...
As regards to the Commissioner's response as well, it's going to have to be careful, so perhaps, this could be taken outside the forum of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Councillor Hackett, thank you for your warm welcome this morning. It's very much appreciated, and thank you for your hospitality when I was in Bideford with yourself and other colleagues recently. And we were only just discussing fairly recently in our own internal governance the opportunity that represents in Bideford in respect of us working in partnership with the Town Council to deliver that operational hub in Jubilee Square. We kind of cut through some red tape, didn't we, pretty quickly, because from my perspective, that offers a real positive joint opportunity to deliver a meaningful presence in the town centre where it's needed most. Just in respect of, I will touch on firearms licensing, if I may, at kind of a more headline level. I acknowledge that for reasons I hope I don't need to explain to anybody in this room, that there was a backlog created in respect of our firearms and explosive licensing unit over the last 18 months to 2 years. We apologise for the frustration that created, both in terms of leisure users of firearms and indeed business owners that are dependent on those licences. We have invested, with the Commissioner's support, heavily in that function, and I know this panel has been briefed on the nature of that investment. That investment is paying dividends. Now, this won't be quick enough for probably people in the room and indeed many people out there, but this calendar year, I am expectant and indeed confident that we will reduce that backlog to what is more of a meaningful workload as opposed to a backlog for any reasonable firearms licensing unit in the country, and we will no longer be an outlier. Our priority has been the safe management of risk within that function for obvious reasons, but our attention now is very much turning to the delivery of a service to our customers that are dependent on those licenses. And it's really pleasing from my perspective to see that backlog coming down significantly. We're also changing our process, so we're far less reliant on temporary permits, which attracted the attention of the Home Office in respect to the risks that go with temporary permits. We've had to focus on that. Those numbers have come drastically down now. So both from a management of risk perspective and a service to customer perspective, we are making improvements. I realise that they're not coming quick enough, but they're being delivered on a sustainable basis. And over the coming 12 months, I am fully expectant to see those numbers and those backlogs come down significantly.
Through the chair, could I ask what the duration of the backlog actually is?
I haven't got the numbers in front of me now, but I mean, we can provide those to you, Councillor, outside of this meeting in terms of, and as the Commissioner quite rightly points, there's a kind of two-track process whereby we have a legacy backlog and we have now a business as usual approach. So there are different timelines depending on whether it's a new application, grant or renewal lands with us, and indeed whether it's for leisure purposes or indeed business purposes, because the Commissioner's quite right to point out that we're prioritising business users because of the impact on people's livelihoods. But we can certainly provide that information outside of the meeting, Councillor. Now, in respect to 101, I acknowledge that we're not where I'd want us to be right now in terms of 101. What I do acknowledge is a significant improvement over the last 7 to 8 months. Around about 7 to 8 months ago, we had an average abandonment rate of over 70% on our 101 line. So 7 out of 10 people were dropping off the call when they tried to ring us on 101. For the month of December, that was less than 25%. And we will drive further improvements. We have a switchboard, so when people ring us, they get through to a human being fairly immediately, and there is that triage. We have also invested heavily in technology to bring online the callback function. So, Council, I will look at how we can reintroduce the provision of current waiting times on our Force website. What I can tell you, if you ring us on a 101, you get told what the current waiting time is, and you're offered a callback facility. And people are choosing to take that. It's really popular. It really works. We are ringing people back when we say we will ring them back. In the vast majority of cases, people are finding that a really accessible and satisfactory service. But we haven't gone far enough yet. I'm not complacent about that, and 101 focus, as well as maintaining our excellent 999 performance that we're currently delivering, is very much a focus of us as we move through this calendar year. HMIC FRS will continue to quite rightly scrutinise us on that. More importantly, it's a key element of our service. If we can't answer the phone swiftly and provide a level of service that we can all be proud of, then that's a fundamental part of getting the basics right. Coming back to your question around policing competence.
Thank you very much for your answers. Greatly appreciated that, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you. When that reply is sent to Councillor Hackett, could it also be sent to Ross as well, so it can be circulated to the whole committee? Thank you. Next up, I have Councillor Timon.
Thank you very much. I think our discussion and question has been largely around the technicalities of the budget up to now. And I think I'd like to just touch on a little bit more the commissioning intentions sort of area. Because at the end of the day, that we're out there to improve the outcomes for our residents, etc. I'll pick one example that I think is of significant concern to councillors and residents in Torbay, and that's the increases we've seen in youth crime and antisocial behaviour. And I know quite a lot of work has been put in by the police to try to deal with that. I'm thankful for the efforts going on. But I think my concern is not only for the victims of the crimes, but the impact that the young people being drawn into that are having on their future lives. And some of the young children being drawn in, particularly I know in Paynton, are unbelievably young. You know, it's frightening how young some of them are that are coming into this. And I think that there are some real consequences of that on their future lives if we don't address this. And what I don't see a lot in this budget, though in the commissioning there's some words that are leading this direction, but I don't see how this budget is actually impacting on how we are going to improve the ability to address that situation. And I think that if I can just add one other dimension to it, it is impacted upon our council in our youth justice service, a lot of extra pressure on that. That's a service which is part funded by partners, and I feel that partners are not putting more into that, and if we're going to address that problem, we need to collectively get together more. So I'd like to know how you think, or whether you think this budget is going to enable us to move towards better outcomes on that area. And I appreciate it might be useful to take some of this to a discussion after this meeting, because we probably can't give it the depth of consideration that it need to in your answer now.
Thank you, Chairman. When I'm just looking through the Commissioning's intentions plan and seeing what may be a bit more explicit to help reassure you around what's being invested around the youth violence or challenges around that. I'm just looking at the funding that I give to youth justice services across the patch, which equates to just over £500,000. And again, these are some of the, as Councillor Hayden said about what's Plymouth getting, actually, should there be more in that pot of youth justice overall? These are some of the discussions that we might want to have before the next budget, that we have a discussion around of where you'd like to see the flex on the commissioning intentions plan, because this is where the opportunity is to invest in those particular areas that's above and beyond business as usual that the police do with youth intervention officers and all the things that comes with that, and all the things that councils are doing with their children's services. I do wonder whether that is a useful conversation to have before next budget around some of these political things that I think might need to have as a senior team across Devon and Cornwall. The other bit I would just like to reassure you on is we have invested quite heavily in the ASB Youth Outreach Service, which is available to everybody here, which is above and beyond the youth service that any of local authorities fund. And I know in particular Plymouth fund multiple organisations at a grassroots level in terms of youth work. I mean, 4 or 5 in just one ward I've come across. Real big investment in that. But actually, we have this antisocial behaviour youth outreach team that can go and sort out some of those challenges in relation to young people. I'm not aware whether or not it's been a referral has been used for any of Paynton's violence, so we would need to go and check that. But that is an option for you to use as an intervention above and beyond anything else that you've already got. That is still in the budget for this year, so that's a service available to Torbay. And I think perhaps it's more understanding what these services are that I'm commissioning for you to be able to pull on is what we need to perhaps articulate a bit better for everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Hewings and Councillor Hayden, I believe you've both spoken before but indicated you wish to speak again, which is fine, but on the promise that you're going to be very quick. But I will come back to you in a minute. From now on, the list is now closed to speakers or questioners who have already asked their question. So, Councillor Hewing.
Mine is very quick. I understand, Jim, that with the new stations that are being opened, when it's quiet, they're answering 111 calls, which is what I've been told by one of your inspectors. And your colleague at the back has just shot bolt upright as I said that. All I was then going to ask was, the figures are coming down, which is great, but is that because some people are answering the calls in the stations when it's quiet? And what impact will that have, particularly on the Cornwall stations during summer months when their staff may well not be able to answer said calls? And you're probably now going to say, in words of very few syllables, they don't answer them.
Councillor, thank you for the question. I mean, the investment into our front offices is a really valuable one, both from a community connection perspective, and the Commission's been really clear on that, and I really value that. To be clear, they're not answering 101 calls. What they are doing is assisting in the management of our digital demands, so emails, for example, because I agree with you. As soon as they pick up the phone, they're committed to that phone call. What we are doing through the use of technology and maximising the productivity of the additional resources that are going into there, when they're not dealing with somebody that's walked into that front counter, we're able to push the emails that were otherwise sitting in our control rooms. And at the worst case scenario, we had a queue of over 3,500 emails in that queue, and we were taking on average about 12 to 14 days to respond to an email. And Councillor Hackett's left the room, but there'll still be of use to value to him, I think, in terms of that 101. The average email queue now is down to less than 100, and the average waiting time for response from us is around about 24 hours. So that's what the staff are doing when they're quiet, which gives them the ability to actually, if somebody walks in, right, I'm going to leave that email now, I'm going to stand up and deal with your inquiry. So I hope that reassures you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Agree with what Councillor Hayden was saying about council tax rises and precept rises in general. In those halcyon days before my children bullied me out of it, I was a smoker, and this rise actually equates to a packet of cigarettes in a year. And on that basis, I can't stand against it. What I can say is I don't like the whole principle of council tax in the first place. It's regressive, it's outdated, it's wrong. But at the same time, Commissioner, I accept that the government give you no opportunity other than to put it up. What I would ask, though, is possibly a left field question, which is, why haven't you put it up by the full amount? Why are you saving me a halfpenny a month?
Thanks, Chairman. We've had this in previous panels as well, where I don't go straight to the full maximum, because I ensure that the force do a calculation of what they actually need. Ideally, I'd like there to be no cap on the council tax, because one of the challenges we have is the anxiety of not knowing what it will be next year. So you think, well, we won't be able to get it next year, so we ought to take it this year, because we don't know what next year brings. I'd rather have no cap. So it's a really, really thought-through, proper council tax increase, where the chief may even ask me for lots more, because it would be able to really robustly push forward fast with improvements, and I may accept that. But at this point in time, it's just from what we've calculated in terms of the amounts. And if I went to £13, that is just, to me, in my mind, just taking the maximum you can take as you can. So I'd rather do it based on a calculation.
Okay.
Can I just say, Chairman, can I just say for the avoidance of doubt, I wasn't actually advocating that we should take the full amount. I was just asking the question.
No problem. Councillor Aspinall.
Thank you, Chair. My query probably seems rather frivolous, but on your income from sales fees, charges and rents on page 47, you're actually saying that you've had no income from foreign national registrations and peddlers. Now, I don't know about Exeter and I don't know about Truro, but in Plymouth we're getting more peddlers coming in. So is this an indication that the police aren't being active? Because it isn't a local authority remit to chase peddlers and get them sorted. So I just wondered whether that's something that you've not taken up, and that maybe it's some way of getting some income. I'm not too sure. And I suppose I feel a bit mean about going on about 101, but the other thing that local authorities have no jurisdiction of is when you have somebody obstructing a service lane or preventing an ambulance getting to a house, etc. We have no authority as a local authority. We have to get to the police to move somebody. But if you're telling me 101 might not get back to me for 24 hours, that's not really a valid thing when you've got something like an obstruction that you need something moving, because one of my residents can't get to work because idiots are parked in a service lane, both top and bottom, and their garage goes out to there. So how are they going to, and they can't find that person whose car it is. So I think really I want some reassurance that we can look to how do we prioritise 101 calls so that something like an obstruction is dealt with fairly promptly. And secondly, a budget income for you is how are you managing peddlers, and how are we making sure that our city centres are free from peddlers, because whilst we want business, we don't want illegal business.
Thank you, Councillor Aspinall. I'll pick up a couple of points, and I'll let Nikki answer the foreign nationals peddler question around there being nil income in relation to it. So just in terms of the Chief Constable mentioned that we now have the triage service, and if you recall, panel, it's something we introduced probably about a year ago. I was pushing and pushing and pushing because people were naturally going through this telephone system and just waiting, and I never spoke to a human being and would be waiting on the line. So the triage system on 101 means you will get through to a human being. So if there was you didn't want to ring 999 because you didn't think it was an emergency about an obstructed vehicle, and I would say if an ambulance was trying to get through, that'd be pretty much an emergency. But ambulance and fire service, I think, can just plough through a road and ruin cars if they want to in an emergency. They have absolute right of way. I've seen it happen with the fire service for sure. But so there is a triage on 101. So there is an opportunity if you were to ring 101 to ask for some assistance immediately, if that is the case. The second thing to say, though, if this is a regular occurrence on regular streets, on the same people being affected, the councillor advocate scheme that I host through my office, I would recommend councillors join it. They can have a quarterly meeting with their inspector, build a relationship up with the local team, and actually work through how they can prevent that happening for a longer term issue. So I'd just like to promote the councillor advocate scheme. There is a real opportunity to work through those issues that fall between stools and seem to never get solved, that can be done through that particular process. But Nikki, on the income issue.
Okay, so with regard to foreign national registration and peddlers, that is about registration. That isn't about penalties of any sort whatsoever, and we don't charge for them anymore. A lot of these things are far more digital now, so we don't have the ability or the remit to charge for them anymore. And I must admit, I did mean to take that line out because it's only been a few years and we don't charge for them anymore. So that's what that's about.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just come in just briefly on the 101 issue. I do recognise the concerns, but what I will say is the latest data I have in front of me shows me that, I mean, it's a weekly set of figures, so these do fluctuate, but this is more than typical at the moment in terms of the service that we're providing. So the average waiting time on 101 was less than 11 minutes, and we answered 82% of the calls received within our own stipulated threshold of 20 minutes. So still room to improve, I absolutely recognise that, but from where we were, not that long ago to where we are now and sustaining that performance, I'm pleased to see that, but also recognise there's further work to be done.
Thank you. Last but not least, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for starting and finishing. Back in 2018, if we can all go back that long, that was when I very first started the panel. And it'd be really remiss of me not to mention this, Commissioner. I asked you then about your accommodation status. I think you know what's coming. So when we look at Charles Cross Police Station, we look at Crown Hill Police Station. Through my time as being on the panel, I had the lovely experience to go to Exeter and watch the brand new station be opened. Even got a chance to be in a cell. Some people would say they never kept her there. But anyway, moving on. You have made many promises about looking at our accommodation status here in Plymouth, i.e. Charles Cross, which is probably our worst one. So thinking about staffing, our police officers, our police staff that have to use that workplace, I can't see nowhere in your budget about how you would like to engage with a local authority to see how we can move forward to make it a better workplace for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden, for actually having concern for staffing and the environment in which they work. To be frank, Charles Cross is not the worst station that we have that needs some form of upgrade at all. In fact, there's been some investment in the custody over the years, and there's even been some elements in relation to, obviously, the front desk for Devonport and the new station at Devonport that's happened in the last, I want to say 10 years, but it's before my time. So Plymouth for an estate issue is not a headache to me in terms of what we need to do. The issue I've actually got is South Devon and the sporadic estate and the lack of ability to even expand the Paynton police team because the location they're in is so small. My South Devon is actually one of our biggest headaches. Exmouth is falling apart, which is why I've got planning permission in. Councillor Loudon, I hope that we manage to be able to solve that and get our application registered after we've done our BAT survey, because that station is literally degraded. We've got some issues in Totnes as part of the South Devon estate with leaks in a basement. We just don't have those same issues with the Plymouth estate. However, if there was a strategy that the council wanted to achieve with the locations that I have police estate on, I'm more than happy to have a conversation, but it would need to be stimulated by the council because I have not got a financial plan at the moment for those buildings. So it would need your vision of what you wanted to do with planning for the area. I don't know if you want to speak in the operational side of those stations, Chief Constable.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor, thank you for the question, and thank you for the respect and the interest you're showing in kind of staff welfare, working within those estate environments. That's very much appreciated. I grew up as a cop in Charlie's. I know every inch of that building, and a lot of it hasn't changed for quite some time, and you're right. But I was in there at Christmas time. I have to say, the staff make the most of what they've got there. The energy, the positivity, the commitment in that building is almost tangible every time I go in. I love that place. I always will. But I do recognise that there's an opportunity there. Operationally, you know, we can maintain our footprint there for some time, and I agree with the Commissioner. There's priorities sit elsewhere, but at some point we will turn our gaze to Plymouth, absolutely, and it'll be really good to work in partnership with the City Council when that time comes. Very much so.
Chair, just to finalise, it goes back to the point, the golden thread I have spoken about all the way through today's meeting. Partnership working and strong leadership, and I think things can be achieved if that is actually done between us all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Brian, we will now enter debate. We've had some points of debate already, so hopefully this shouldn't take too long. Procedurally, I'm minded to make a recommendation now and then have that debated on and perhaps amended by the panel going forward. Is that all in order, Ross, to take that approach?
Yes, Chair. So you've essentially three options before you, panel, which is to consider a veto of the proposed precept, support the precept and make recommendations, or support the precept without qualifications. So as long as your recommendation fits within one of those categories, Chair, it should be fine.
Very well. Then I would like to propose that from the Chair that we support the precept and also capture the comments made during the debate as much as we can. So that would be my proposal. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crowd. So I now open that up to the floor to debate. Who's first? No? Councillor Wright.
I propose that we move to vote. Am I able to do that in the rules?
You certainly are.
Thank you.
We're going to use the voting system.
Councillor Haggett.
Happy to second that.
Thank you very much. We'll move straight to the vote.
Right, Chair, we'll use the voting system. Members should see their units in front of them flash in a moment. You'll need to press green to be in favour, amber to abstain, and red to vote against this recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. That's carried, and I think unanimously. Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Wright.
Sorry, I've just noted that's recorded as Exeter County Council, having voted. Please could that be changed in records to Exeter City Council?
Yes, it can, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Thank you, panel, for that. Moving on. Before I do move on, is everybody content that we keep ploughing on? Or is there a need of a comfort break? Everybody happy that we...
Is it okay if I...
Yes, yes. You did say earlier that you needed to rush off.
Yes,
Yes.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair. Apologies, I can see a couple of colleagues sitting behind the Chief Constable and Commissioner. I think they may perhaps be indicating.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll take a 10-minute comfort break, I think, and then I think we'll have to take some of the papers as read and then move on swiftly. So thank you very much, panel. out to find the commission. Item number 7 is next. Police and Crime Plan End of Term Report. Commissioner, considering the time restraints we have on us, I'm going to suggest we take it as read and go straight into questions. Okay, panel, any questions? Yep, Councillor Hayden.
Chair, I'd just like to make a comment. I think through the budget, we've probably, all the questions we would want to have asked, we've probably asked in this item.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Commissioner, did you want to speak?
Chairman, it was just to say, this is the first time my office has produced a report like this, and it's to help, particularly, panel, you can see how things have had regard to the police and crime plan, which you obviously have sight of and comment on, and you might want to consider for the next term of office what you would expect to see in proving the regard to the police and crime plan. So it's the first time we've ever done it. It's just to help with a governance issue. It's not for a public consumption and someone who wants to read it at night. It's actually for a governance element to show that there's been regard, to show that the Chief Constable has had regard to the police and crime plan priorities, to show that my office has been focusing on delivering on that police and crime plan priorities. So it's the first time we've done it. So any comments outside of this meeting that you think would be helpful in any future one, and I don't believe any other commissioner has produced one either. So it's more an accountability document to prove that the Chief Constable has actually taken regard to the plan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Then from the Chair, I will propose that we note that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hayden. All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Any against? Any abstentions? No, thank you. Moving on to item 8, Police and Crime Commissioners Update Report. I think probably the same ditto with this. So are there any questions or observations? No. I have one quick issue. Yesterday at Cornwall Council, the Standards Committee met, and I noticed reading through the reports that it has been raised as an ongoing issue, and that is a single point of contact for councillors through to the police force. Just wondering if there's any sort of update, and have you had representations from that from Cornwall Council regarding that going forward?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the leader councillor, Linda Taylor, spoke with me about this particular issue. I've had a conversation with the Chief Constable, and we've come up with a solution, which I think we'll need to just work through. But fundamentally, each local authority could go through their monitoring officer, and they can have a single point of contact for the monitoring officer to go to the police. That is not a problem from the Chief Constable's perspective. But that's, as you already do go through monitoring officers to report problems, I think that's a really good filter to enable a direct contact into policing, which Chief Constable is happy to support.
Okay, thank you. That's good news. Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quick one. On section 5, on the nitrous oxide section, our community safety partnership team have been asking us, because of the finds of canisters across our CSP area, the question was, does your office plan to do any awareness raising around the change in the legislation?
We have done some general publicity around it. We haven't done anything very specifically targeted to a particular age group, though. Just look. Oh, he's not in the room. My head of comms at the minute. But we've done some general publicity, but we haven't done a lot in relation to a targeted age group audience, which may well be worth following up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, as Chair, I'll propose that we note that report. Vice Chair to second. Yeah, thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any no? Thank you. Moving on, item 9, the scorecard. Again, are there any sort of highlights you have, Commissioner?
Chairman, there is a technical correction that we need to do, which I'll hand over to Felicity to just inform you.
Thank you. Felicity.
Thank you, Chair. On your scorecards, the one with all the colourful arrows, you'll notice that for deaths or serious injuries by high-risk driving behaviour, the panel report noted a significant increase on the baseline, showing at 74 offences in the latest report. We have done this highlighted to our office that seemed extremely high and alerted us to undertake some more questioning to assess whether or not that was correct. And I'm pleased to confirm to you that that was not correct data and was due to an error in the inputting of a number of offences into the police recording system. A piece of work is now underway to make sure that that is all amended, but as at today, the corrected, updated figure for this period is 55 offences as opposed to 74. This is, of course, still an increase on the baseline, so further work will be undertaken to assess whether or not that 55 is still correct, which is still high, or whether there are further cases that have been incorrectly inputted, and we'll provide an update on that in due course. So for the record, we wanted to note that that data was incorrect, and when the full assessment of what the correct data is available, we'll provide that to you for the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. That's been recorded. Yeah, thank you. Any questions? No. Okay. I will propose the scorecard is noted from the Chair, Vice Chairman to second. All in favour? Yep, and that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 10, complaints against the Commissioner.
Chairman, there are none in the last period.
Yeah, thank you. Do I have to formally note that? Or no? Okay. Moving on to the last item, the work programme. Are there any issues or work programme items that members would wish to add?
Through you, Chair, just to advise the panel, Councillor Toms raised an issue earlier to consider the proportion of officers spread across the region's VCUs, but we'll pick that up and flesh that out with the Commissioner's office.
Thank you. Any other points? Yes, Councillor.
When might we see the rural crime item being put on the agenda?
Yeah, I suppose the answer to that would be imminently. Certainly within the next couple of meetings, I would say. If not at the next meeting.
Through you, Chair. We'll happily talk to the Commissioner's office about the timing of the report and whether it's available for the next session. Members may consider a task and finish group or something along those lines if the timing's not acceptable.
Okay, any other points or suggestions? No? Okay, well, that just leaves me to thank everybody for their attendance, to thank the Commissioner's officers for coming along today, and to thank the Commissioner for her input and engagement for the past, well, was it 3 years? Well, we